I've had situations like this with other people, and lots of where they given the advice of cold turkey.
Right.
For me, just no, I couldn't have done it. Yeah. The only way that would work for me is turkey. Okay, you enjoy. Very nice. How long you do it? Very nice, man. Some rest to God also. D-Net. I can text you. Morning. Morning. Isaac, do you mind? Could you record also? Okay. All right, so let's learn. All right, so first of all, big Ashafat to Schlumberger for sponsoring this morning's learning and breakfast. To all good things. Shav Brach and Hatzlacha. That comes from, feeding Yidden. It's a good thing. It's learning. All right. So let's talk about Shaivim a little bit. So we I think this is our second year, I believe, talking about Shaivim during these weeks, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So it's like this, just to give a little bit of sort of direction of what we're going to be doing. So today is going to be a little bit more foundational work. Okay, so this is really more of an introduction to the aspect of Shaivim that we'll be discussing this, for the next few weeks. Today is going to be more laying the foundation. So we're not going to explain anything yet. We're sort of just laying the groundwork. And then, Be'ez Hashem, in the coming weeks, things will become a little bit more clear. Now, to lay the foundation, what we're going to learn are a few Torahs from the Vilna Gaon and the Zohar Kodesh, and Vilna Gaon. That's going to be the foundation. And then, Be'ez Hashem, in the coming weeks, we'll learn some, Torahs of the Baal Shem Tov and so on, and Chassidus, in order to sort of explain it and bring it down to earth. So again, you're forewarned that you're going to come out of this year today not really understanding any more than when you came in, but at least the foundation, and I hope that you'll come next week, and then we'll begin to understand a little bit more. Okay, so a little bit of a hakdam again. What Shaivim again? So we have this tradition, and the Rizal really explains what it's talking about. This is tradition that during these weeks of Shaivim, Shmais Ve'er Rabbi, Shalach Yisrael Mishpatim, there's an inyan of doing tshuva and being misak in one's life, specifically when it comes to the inyan of Zachar Nekeva. Shmir Savir, Shmir Sinayim, Shalom Bayis, these inyanim, that's during the weeks of Shaivim. That's a tradition. Now the Rizal explained that the significance, why is it dafka now? So the Rizal said because these parshas that we're reading about, I mentioned this by Shal Shudas, that the time of the year that we that's shining with the inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim is Pesach. But the Rizal explains that that's true in the cycle of Yom Tovim, right? So Pesach in the Yom Tovim cycle is a time of Yitzias Mitzrayim, Golos Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim. But the Rizal taught that even outside of the Yom Tov cycle, the Kriyas HaTorah cycle is also significant. The fact that we learn about the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim on these Shabbosos from Shmos, through Mishpatim, it's talking about Yitzias Mitzrayim, which culminates with Matan Torah, with Har Sinai, which the story of Har Sinai is completed in Parshas Mishpatim. As the pasuk says, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Why are you leaving Mitzrayim? Tavdim tzlokim ha'arazeh, in order to receive the Torah." So the whole inyan of, just like in the Yom Tov cycle, Pesach leads to Shavuos, right? So just like in the Yom Tov cycle, you have Yitzias Mitzrayim, Matan Torah is shining during the time of Pesach through Shavuos. So in the cycle of Parshias, which are connected to Shabbos, right? So these times of Shmos through Mishpatim are also shining with the inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, that inyan. And so the Rizal said a major inyan of the story of the sort of behind the scenes theme, of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah is the inyan of Zachar Nekeva. You find such a thing, right? At the very, very beginning, our first introduction to Golus Mitzrayim was Yosef Tzaddik being alone and having to deal with the inyan of Zachar Nekeva. That was his nisayon. And so, for example, Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the Redeemer, so he was saved by women, right? So Basia, first of all, saves him, and then his daughter, his sister Miriam, everyone knows Chazal, right, that his parents were separated, which is also a separation between Zachar and Nekeva. But Miriam, the daughter, convinced her parents to get back together to have Moshe Rabbeinu. Miriam is watching from a distance, making sure that Moshe is okay. And then when Basia, a woman, saves him, Miriam gets his mother to protect him, to nurse him, and so on. So there's a lot of and the Meyalde Se'evriyas, right? The women, the Jewish midwives. The pasuk makes a whole deal that they save the Jewish people, the Jewish men, and so on. There's a lot of themes with Zachar and Nekeva when it comes to Mitzrayim. Chazal in fact say that Mitzrayim was Erevas Aretz. It was a place of great impurity when it comes to men and women. And so the Rizal said that since you have this sort of backdrop and this behind, sort of theme running through Yitzias Mitzrayim and even to Matan Torah, because it says by Matan Torah that in order to prepare themselves, the Jewish people, to receive the Torah, they had to have 3 days of separation, of purification in the inyan of men and women. So there is this sort of backdrop of Zachar and Nekeva and working out the inyan of Zachar and Nekeva by Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah. So said the Rizal, since during this time, the Shabbosis of these weeks, we learn about Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, and the backdrop of that is Zachar and Nekeva, so it's a time to do tshuva and to be misak in the inyan of Zachar and Nekeva. That's what the Rizal said. Okay. So the first question we'll deal with, again, we're not going to answer this completely today, but again, like I said, just laying the foundation. The first question is, well, one second. I just mentioned to you that there's 2 times in the year which is shining with the light of Pesach and Matan Torah. There's the Yom Tov cycle, which is Pesach and Shavuos, right? That's obviously shining with the inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim. And then you have this time of year in terms of the Kriyas Torah and Shabbos, that's shining with Pesach, with the inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah. So why is it Davka in these weeks, which is related to Yitzias Mitzrayim in terms of the Kriyas Torah and Shabbos, why is it Davka this aspect of why is it Davka now that the Rizal says to work on Zachar Nekeva? We don't find such an inyan that actually Pesach or Shavuos you work on Zachar Nekeva inyan. There's 2 times, there's 2 ways in which Pesach, which Yitzias Mitzrayim expresses itself, in the Yom Tov season and the Kriyas Torah season. So if they're both expressing Yitzias Mitzrayim, why is it that the inyan of the Masak and Zachar Nekeva, which the Rizal says is the backdrop of Yitzias Mitzrayim, why is that only the Avodah when Yitzias Mitzrayim is expressing itself in these Shabbosis in Kriyas Torah, as opposed to the main, which we usually think is the main time when Yitzias Mitzrayim is being displayed, which is Pesach and Shavuos. So why? As if this is an Avodah that's connected, if the Avodah of Shoivim, Zachar Nekeva, is connected deeply to Pesach, to Yitzias Mitzrayim, then why is it only related to the Yitzias Mitzrayim that we connect to during these weeks, as opposed to the Pesach that we connect to on Pesach itself? Right, so that's the first question. So it must be that the inyan of Zachar Nekeva, not only is it connected to Pesach and to Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, but it's also specifically connected to Shabbos. And therefore, when it comes to the inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, as it's expressing itself through Shabbos, through the Shabbosis of these weeks, now you have a very strong inyan of Zachar Nekeva. Now the truth is, we do have a very strong inyan of Zachar Nekeva when it comes to Shabbos, right? How do we introduce Shabbos? So we light Shabbos candles, right? It's a chiyuv on everyone to have Shabbos candles. The minhag is that women do it. The inyan of Shabbos candles is what? Is Shalom Bayis. So the whole inyan of Shabbos is wrapped up in Shalom Bayis. For example, Shemoneh Esrei is different than Shabbos, right? But the first 3 brachas and last 3 brachas are pretty much the same. So Shemoneh Esrei is of Shabbos is what it is. But let's say for Ma'ariv, when we lead up to Shemoneh Esrei, we have the bracha of Hashkivenu, so we change that a little bit, right? And what we do on Shabbos, we add in the words Frois Aleinu Sukkah Shleimecha. We highlight the meaning of Shalom. We say Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Bayis. That's what we talk about on Shabbos. So again, just sort of introducing the introduction. Said the Arizal again. The Arizal said that a backdrop of Yitzias Mitzrayim is the inyan of Zachar Nekeva, of Shalom Bayis with the Zachar Nekeva. And Yitzias Mitzrayim is glowing and shining in the Yom Tov season on Pesach and in the Shabbos season during these weeks. So therefore said the Arizal, no, if Shabbos is a time which is anyway a time that's the inyan of Shalom Bayis, plus the fact that these Shabbos are shining with Yitzias Mitzrayim, so then you have the inyan of these weeks to work on Shalom Bayis and Zachar Nekeva. So that's what we have. That's the Avodah right now. Now, you're all men over here, so we're going to talk about the inyan of Zachar Nekeva, but a little bit of a different way. We're going to try to make it in such a way to define for us this inyan of Zachar Nekeva, how it applies to each one of us within ourselves and on Avodas Hashem, without it having to be necessarily. It's going to affect, obviously, literally Zachar Nekeva, but you'll see what I mean. So let's begin. Okay. Maramaka number 1. So again, this is what we're going to be right now talking about is this inyan of Zachar Nekeva. Again, and you'll see in a second, when I say Zachar Nekeva, I don't only mean literally males and females. I'm talking about there's an ingredient in creation which is called Zachar, and an ingredient in creation which is called Nekeva. And we'll see that everyone has both qualities, everything, and Avodas Hashem requires both of these Nekudas within yourself to be activated and actualized. And ultimate Shalom Bayis really is within the self, to sort of make harmony between your Zachar and your Nekeva. You'll see what I mean, hopefully. So Maramaka number 1. Okay, so let's begin like this. There's a Medrash Rabbah in Parshas Veschanan, Siman Lamed Aleph. Okay, this Medrash is talking about, it's going on the Psukim of Har Sinai. When Hashem says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. So the Medrash says a very interesting thing. We know that twice a day there's a mitzvah to say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right? So we say Kriya Shema twice a day. What's the origin of that sentence? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So it's a pasuk in Parashat Veschanan. It's a pasuk in Chumash. We also know that there's a tradition that Yaakov, the Shvatim said that with Yaakov, right? Yaakov is on his deathbed, and he's not sure. Maybe one of my children are not going to be 100%. And so the Shvatim in unison said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And Yaakov responds, Baruch Shem Kol Mechus L'Olam Levon, right? But this Medrash introduces us to another conversation of Shema Yisrael, which you might not be aware of. So it says like this, Umeheichen Zoch Yisrael Likras Shema. Where did the Jewish people have the schus of this pasuk? Where's the origin of this pasuk before it was recorded in Chumash? So Amar Pinchas Bar Chama, Yiman Torah Zoch Yisrael Likras Shema. The source says Rav Pinchas Bar Chama, it was during Har Sinai. What was the conversation by Har Sinai? Keitzad Ad Moitza, where do you find it? So it says the Medrash like this: Like Pasach HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Sinai Tchila El B'Davar Zeh. The first thing the Rebbe was said at Har Sinai was not Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It was not. That's the first pasuk that's recorded for Har Sinai. But really, there was an introduction to Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and this was it. Shema Yisrael. The Rebbe said Shema Yisrael. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So he said the word Shema Yisrael. Nanu Kulam V'Amru, and Klal Yisrael in unison responded to that sentence of Hashem, Shema Yisrael, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So we responded, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It's the Medrash. So it was a conversation by Har Sinai. It's a conversation by Har Sinai. Now, Rabbanan Amri, the Rabbanan explain what was contained in that back and forth. Right, so Hashem says, Shema Yisrael, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and we say, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And that's somehow the intro and so on, putting Har Sinai in context. What's the meaning of that? So Rabbanan Amri, the Rabbanan said like this, Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu Yisrael. Rabbanan Shalom is saying to the Jewish people, and this is the introduction to Har Sinai. And again, in Har Sinai is a culmination of Yitzias Mitzrayim. So what we're about to say right now, what the Rabbanan Shalom is saying right now as an intro to Har Sinai, is going to sum up the entire inyan from Galus Mitzrayim all the way to that moment. This is all Shovim, right? This is all exactly what Shovim is, this sentence. So it says the Gemara like this, Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Hashem said to the Jewish people, Banai, my children, Kol Masha Barasi, everything I created, Barasi Zugais. I created in male-female form. Everything in the world exists, Zachar and Nekeva. Shemayim v'aretz, Zugais. Heaven and earth, that's Zachar and Nekeva. Cham u'levana, the sun and the moon, Zugais. Adam v'chava, Zugais. Olam hazav, Olam haba, Zugais. It's all pairs. That's how I created the world. But me, myself, says the Rabbanan Shalom, I am one. I am one. And what is this? And this is the meaning. Masha Karinu, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It says like the Medrash. So what the Rebbeinu Shalom is again summing up the entire Jewish people's experience in Yitzis Mitzrayim leading to Har Sinai with this statement, that everything is Zachar Nekeva, but I, says the Rebbeinu Shalom, I am absolutely one. Okay, what is the meaning of this? So okay, sounds like that's okay. Just making an observation. Everything is doubled, everything is in pairs, but I am absolutely one. Okay. There's a teaching from the Vilna Gaon. Okay, and this is going to be the sort of the basic idea that we're going to be running with as follows. The Vilna Gaon says like this: There's a certain this inyan of Zachar Nekeva that exists in the world. Oh, thank you very much. This inyan of Zachar Nekeva that exists in the world is something that here. You know what? Let's just read the Gaon inside, and then hopefully the words will come. Marmukah number 2. This is a Bir HaGra. The Gra wrote a commentary to Safra D'Tzneisa. Safra D'Tzneisa is a section of the Zohar Kodesh. So this is right in the beginning of his commentary to Safra D'Tzneisa. So the Vilna Gaon quotes and he references a very famous medrash, Zohar Kodesh, that everyone knows from the time that they're little kids, right? That Hashem was deciding how to start Chumash. And it was going from every letter, right? And every letter came to Hashem, start the Torah with me, and there's some problems, and Hashem says, no, not you, and then eventually the Rebbeinu Shalom decides the letter Beis, right? Beis for gracious. So it says like this, V'zeh side mash amar v'zayir. So it says in the Zohar Kodesh, in Parshas Bereishis, Da'al me'isri b'rois Beis, that the world was created with the letter Beis, right? That's the beginning of Bereishis. But Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Zohar Kodesh says that Hashem says the letter Beis, that I'm going to create the world with you. You're going to be the beginning. Beis. Now again, Beis already means two. Right? That's already a hint to what we just saw in the previous medrash. That the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I created the world with this duality, with this pairing of Zachar and Nekeva. Everything exists, and everything comes into existence, and everything develops through this inyan of Zachar and Nekeva. Everything within itself has Zachar and Nekeva qualities. That's the inyan of Beis. Now, V'omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aleph, but Hashem said the letter Aleph, says the Zohar Kodesh, Kol Yichudi Lo Yeh Elabach, that my unity will be revealed through you. So the world is created with the letter Beis, but Har Sinai, Anochi, Aleph, that's the Torah is given with the letter Aleph. So says the Vilna Gaon like this, we'll see in a second. Says the Vilna Gaon, the meaning of this is as follows, is that again, the Rebbeinu Shalom made the world in such a way where everything is being developed through this inner Zachar Nekeva. But here's the idea. The ultimate shleimus, here, let me put it this way. If you remember in Marmukah number 1, as you can tell, I'm having a hard time beginning this. We'll see how to do it. So in Marmukah number 1, one of the examples that the Medrash gave, for example, in terms of the pairings, it was the sun and the moon. Sun and the moon. So that's a classic example that Chazal give, and the Medrash itself was giving, to a classic Zachar Nekeva relationship, the sun and the moon. The sun is the Zachar, and the moon is the Nekeva that receives light from the sun, and so on. Zachar Nekeva. Now, everyone knows when it comes to the sun and the moon, there's a history with the sun and the moon. The Rebbeinu Shalom made the sun and the moon with the plan of what? They should both be the same size, right? The same power, and both share the same crown, right? That was the description of Chazal. Comes the moon and says to Rebbeinu Shalom, you can't have two kings sharing the same crown. So what does Rebbeinu Shalom say to the moon? You're right. You are, because of what you said, and you refuse to live with the sun under one crown. So because of that, you're going to be diminished. You go low. That story, and then that's what it says. And then ultimately, Chazal say that ultimately with the coming of Mashiach, what's going to happen is that the moon will return to its original stature and be able to share the same crown with the sun. So that's the story of the moon, right? So the way it's supposed to be is both the same size, sun and the moon sharing the same crown. It didn't work out like that. The moon is very, very diminished, and slowly but surely, with the coming Mashiach, it has to grow in stature and return to the same size as the sun and share the same crown. That's a story about the moon. It's not just a story about the moon. That's a story describing the process that every nekeva has to go through vis-a-vis the zachar. And again, Bear in mind, I'm not talking about necessarily men and women. I'm talking about within yourself. You have a koyach zachar and a koyach nekeva. And the ultimate goal is that your zachar and your nekeva, and avodas Hashem, whatever zachar means, whatever nekeva means, we didn't explain it yet. They have to become unified, the same size, and share the same crown. Share the same crown. Until that happens, though, there's a process. The process is that the tzad nekeva, the feminine quality within you and avodas Hashem, is fallen to the ground. And that has to be raised up and developed to a point of where it can become one with the zachar and share the same crown. Said the Vilna Gaon, this is what's being described by that medrash with Har Sinai. What the Rebbeinu Shalom is saying to the Jewish people is that the process of Yetzias Mitzrayim leading up to Har Sinai was a development of bringing the nekeva back up, of allowing the moon to return to her full stature, of the zugais, of the pairs of zachar and nekeva to be unified once again under the same crown. And when that takes place, when Hashem says that everything I create in the world are zugais, are pairs, the meaning of that is that this Indian is that every single one of us, in order to connect to Hashem properly, we have a zachar, we have a nekeva within us that allows us to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom properly. But just as the moon was diminished, it means that our nekeva, the nekeva part of who we are, is also mamish all the way on the floor and underdeveloped. And our avodah is to develop our nekeva, to reunify it with our zachar, in order to get to the point of where they can both share the same crown. And when that takes place, then the ultimate oneness of Hashem is able to be experienced when those two parts of who we are, zachar and nekeva, are in unison. You'll see what I mean. Take a look at Marmukah number 2 again, the Vilna Gaon. Vo'inyan, 3 lines in. Vo'inyan. Ki betchila haya b'loi maskala. Said the Vilna Gaon, in the beginning, in other words, before a person is complete, before Har Sinai, so to speak, before that moment when everything is, where the zachar and nekeva part of you are completely unified under one crown, haya b'loi maskala, then your life, then your avodah, your zachar and nekeva are without maskala. Maskala literally means a scale. It's like if you imagine a scale, like an old-fashioned scale, where the two sides are balanced and equal, right? So it's b'loi maskala. It's without equilibrium. They're not unified. Your zachar side and your nekeva side are not being unified, are not being brought together. They're not even. They're not the same height, and they're not all sharing the same crown, so to speak. They're not being unified into one scale, so to speak. Beside, and the secret of that, and the letter in Chumash that describes a zachar and nekeva which are imbalanced, which are not all together, a description of the moon being diminished, right? That's the letter Beis. Because the letter Beis means two, and two means two things that are disjointed, that are different from each other, that are disconnected. So the letter Beis represents a situation of where your nekeva is fallen, of where your moon has been diminished. That's what Beis means. And that's how the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world, where everything is with zachar and nekeva, but the nekeva side of things is very much low. This is going back to the story of creation, right? We know that what happened by the sin of the Yetz Hadas is what? So Chava is for example, if you think of the story, the Nachash can't have a conversation with Adam. Because Adam is very, very high up. The Nachash can't talk to Adam. Nachash can talk to Chava, because Adam and Chava are like the sun and the moon. And this is already after the story when the moon was diminished. So Chava is in a lower state, in a lower level than Adam, so much so that the Nachash can talk to Chava. And because the Nachash talks to Chava, so then Chava eventually brings down Adam as well. And so and as a result of that story, so Hashem says to Chava, V'hu yim shalbach, that the male side will become dominant over the female side. In other words, just furthering the issue of the diminishment of the moon, of the lowering of the stature of nekeva. And this is all the problem. And this all comes because the world was created with the letter Beis. The letter Beis means two, and two means two separate things. And if it's separate, the zachar is over here, up, the sun is the sun, and the moon is diminished. Says the Vilna Gaon, but that's all, and that is something, says the Vilna Gaon, that we needed to correct in Mitzrayim. The inyan of Golus Mitzrayim is for every single Jew to to identify their nekeva, their moon, which until that point has been lowered and diminished and so on in a very low place, the letter Beis. Avoid in Galus Mitzrayim is to raise your nekeva up, to allow it to return to the stature of the Zachar, where they're both able to share the same crown. The situation of Zachar and Nekeva sharing the same crown and being unified, mamish as one, that's the letter Aleph. So says the Zohar Kodesh that the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world with the letter Beis, but Har Sinai is with the letter Aleph. This is another way of describing the story of the moon, or the story of the Zachar and Nekeva, part of who we are. That the beginning, what starts off with is what? Is that you have a Zachar, you have a Nekeva, but it's completely imbalanced. Your Zachar is what it is, and your Nekeva is all the way on the floor. The pasuk says, for example, it's a classic pasuk that the Sfarim always quote, is Ragleha Yardes Maves. Her feet fall into death. In other words, when the moon is diminished and in the low stature, which is reflective of all of our Nekeva Inyanim, the Nekeva side of who we are, being diminished and very low, then already there's a part of you that has conversations with the Nachash, you understand? So that's something, and so the Ikar Avoid of Galus Mitzrayim, again, we don't know what this means yet, but the Ikar Avoid of Galus Mitzrayim was to develop the Nekeva, to return the Nekeva to her stature as being partners with the Zachar, equal partners with the Zachar. And again, going back, that's why he said throughout Galus Mitzrayim, there's this theme of females rescuing males, right? The Miyaldais, and you have Miriam and Basia. Even Chazal say that the 70 souls that go to Mitzrayim, and the 70 means that number, when you hit 70, that's shleimus, that's completion on some level, right? 70. Who was the 70th? So it doesn't say who it was, right? But it was Yocheved. She was Nola Ben Hachamis. So you see that even going into Mitzrayim, the shleimus of the Jewish people going into Mitzrayim was through an Akeva. Because this is part of the inyan of Galus Mitzrayim, which is to identify what it means Zachar in Yiddishkeit and what it means Nekeva in Yiddishkeit, and to recognize that the Nekeva side of Yiddishkeit is fallen, mamish fallen to the ground, and the Avodah of Galus Mitzrayim is to raise the Nekeva up slowly but surely, ad kedei kach, where now you could stand by Har Sinai, and the Zachar and Nekeva part of you are mamish in unison, sharing the same crown as it was with the sun and the moon originally, and as it will be with the sun and the moon with Mashiach, and you could hear the words Anochi Hashem Elokecha with the letter Aleph. So there's a certain level of Elokus, of divinity, of Hashem's presence in the world that could only be revealed when the Zachar and Nekeva are in unison. You can't hear Anochi Hashem Elokecha, you can't hear that I am Hashem and I am the one God unless you have found oneness in your life. So you have a Zachar, you have a Nekeva, but if you are in duality, if you are pulled in two directions and your Nekeva is all the way on the floor, then you don't have the kalim, you don't have the infrastructure within yourself to hear Aleph. All you could hear is Beis. In order to hear Aleph, then you have to work through this inyan of your Zachar and your Nekeva becoming one. And so this is the story of Har Sinai. Therefore, the introduction to Har Sinai is, says the Rebbeinu Shalom, the whole world I created with pairs. And the inyan of pairs has been dysfunctional from the time of Adam and Chava until this moment, says the Rebbeinu Shalom. But now that the pairs have been rectified through Galus Mitzrayim, now I can say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I can reveal the letter Aleph that is able to come into the world through the Zachar and Nekeva pairs that have become one. So this is the point, that what Hashem wants to reveal to us is the letter Aleph. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. But we can't hear that or receive that if all we are Bezes. If we're just pulled in two directions, and Zachar is like this, and Nekeva is like that, the sun is up here, and the moon has been diminished, then we can't receive Anochi Hashem Elokecha. The only way where we can receive the Aleph is if our two parts of Zachar and Nekeva have been unified. Hashem is one, and we are not one, right? Hashem is one, and we are Zachar and Nekeva. But if we can make our Zachar and Nekeva as unified as possible, then we can receive and hear the oneness of Hashem. And this is the process of Galus Mitzrayim, to unify our Zachar and Nekeva, to allow the Aleph of Anochi Hashem Elokecha to be heard. This is what the Vilna Gaon says. Again, let's see, it's very terse, but you'll see what I mean. In 3 lines into the second Marmok and Ve'inyan. Ki betchila, in the beginning of creation, again going back to the sun and the moon, haya b'loi maskil, it was without this balance, the scales. Zachar and Nekeva, the two sides were not even and they weren't unified. Like if you imagine in a scale, like an old-fashioned scale, not only are the two scales balanced, but they're also unified by the middle, whatever it's called, like the middle piece that keeps them together. So if you imagine a scale and one side would represent male and the other side would represent female, so a balanced scale means that they're not only the same height together, the two scales, but they're unified by the middle piece. So a maskela represents, in the writings of Vilna Gaon, a maskela represents a perfect unity between Zachar and Nekeva sharing the same crown. So he says, but in the beginning, it was without maskela, it was without a balance, it was without a scale, beside ice base. That's the secret of the letter base. V'amar Kadosh Baruch Hu ice aleph, and Hashem therefore said to the letter aleph that I can't create the world with you. The world is not ready to hear Anoich Hashem Elokecha. We can't hear that because we're all in disarray, we're all in duality, and our moons have been diminished. Kol yichudi li elabach. My unity will be revealed through the letter aleph when the duality of people with their Zachar and Nekeva are able to be brought together. V'hu b'chinas keser. The aleph represents the crown that the Zachar and Nekeva both share, right? The two sun and the moon sharing the same crown. Shupela, which is always the word. The keser is always represents something mysterious, something beyond, something we don't fully understand yet, which is the same letters as aleph. Ubrias Olam Aidei Beis v'Aleph, and therefore these two letters, Beis and Aleph, are summing up all of creation. The imbalanced, the duality, the imbalanced, the diminished moon state of Zachar being up here and the Nekeva being all the way down. The requirement of Golus Mitzrayim is represented by the letter Beis, but then the completed state of Zachar and Nekeva, where now we're able to hear the Dvar Hashem of Anoich Hashem Elokecha, the Geula from Mitzrayim, that's the letter Aleph. That's the letter Aleph. The Ekra Hamaskala, and this Indian of a scale, who Bashvil Zachar Nekeva, is the Indian of Zachar Nekeva. This idea, so again, this is the story. So we have this sort of now mystical history, I guess you could call it, whatever, of what's going on through Golus Mitzrayim. Again, we don't have yet our definitions of what Zachar means and what Nekeva means. But this is what we have so far. In order for Hashem is one, and in order for us to truly, truly hear Hashem's oneness, which is the letter Aleph, which is the Tachlis, which is Har Sinai, then we have to create within ourselves some level of oneness as well. Now, we're not God, so we're not absolutely one. We're created as Zachar and Nekeva within ourselves. But the best we can do, at least, is have our Zachar and Nekeva work together, be the same size, so to speak, and both share the same crown. And then at least we're as close to one as possible, and then we could hear Anoich Hashem Elokecha. But the problem was, from the beginning of time, the moon, which is Nekeva, has been diminished. And so the Ikra Avoda, therefore, for the Jewish people in Mitzrayim, in order to receive the Aleph of Anoichi and Har Sinai, was to raise up the Nekeva to the point of where she's now, so to speak, the same height and the same stature as Zachar, sharing the same crown. And now you can hear Anoichi by Har Sinai. That's the story. This is something that's expressed also by the Leshem in Marmukah number 3. So he says like this: Ki yasad hayoytze bereishis yisbarach shemai, the Rebbeinu Shloim established from the beginning of creation, sheitikune Zachar and Nekeva, that all of life is revolving around this duality, this balance, this relationship between male and female within ourselves. And all that we go through in life is all revolving on this nakuda of the Rebbeinu Shloim putting us in situations where we can develop our nekevas to become unified with our Zachar. That's what all of life is about. All of it is Hashem is about this Indian of getting your Zachar and Nekeva on the same page, on the same board, and to both use this, to have the same crown. That's what all of it is Hashem is about. Ach la'asad lavai, and la'asad lavai, when all this work has been done, and on a large historical scale, we've gone through our Golus Mitzrayim altogether. Yisuknu kulam, all of this will be unified. Zachar and Nekeva will become unified again. And then we'll be able to have the revelation of Aleph, of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, of Anoich Hashem Elokecha, v'yisyachdu kulam le'echad, and everything will become unified as one. Begilui or Kidush Yisparach, v'yaz echad le'ela, u'shema echad l'sata, Hashem will be one above, His name will be one below. Right? That's what it means. Hashem echad, Shema echad. And Hashem echad means the Anoichi of Hashem, and the Shema echad means that our duality of Zachar and Nekeva will also become as one as possible. That's what it means. If we become as one as possible with our Zachar and Nekeva merging together as much as possible under one crown, then now we could at least hear the true unity of Aleph, which is Hashem. Hashem echad, u'shema echad. L'sata b'gilui gam. Fine. That's the concept. Now, one, that's Aleph. I mean, it's, okay, Bey, so to speak. So next point. That was one. Now we'll go two. Okay. Next point. This diminished state of the moon. Now this is important to know. Okay, so now we have a sort of a basic outline of what Yiddishkeit's about, of what our Avodas Hashem is, what's Galus Mitzrayim, what's our Sinai. The moon, our Nekeva, has been diminished. We got to raise it up to become one with the Zachar. Then you can hear Neichash Malakecha. Simple, yeah? Okay, good. You're good to go. Now let's talk about what are the stages, how diminished is the moon, and what are the different shlavim, what are the different stages that it needs to go through in order to return to oneness with the Zachar. Okay? Is it just in one shot? Does it go from a diminished moon to full stage with the sun? Or are there shlavim, are there different stages? So in the Kisvei we find that there are many stages. There are many stages from the moon, from her lowest state to completion with the sun, to become one under the same crown. There are many stages. For our purposes, and again, and realize this, all these stages that are necessary to raise the moon to become one with the sun, or to raise the Nekev to become one with the Zachar, are going to be seen, are going to be expressed in Yitzias Mitzrayim. Right? Because that's what Yitzias Mitzrayim is. Yitzias Mitzrayim is, like we saw, is preparing Zachar and Nekev to become one, to hear Aleph and Har Sinai, right? So whatever the stages are when we're talking about the development of the moon, or taking the Nekeva from the bottom and returning her to her partnership with the Zachar, we're going to see that in Yitzias Mitzrayim. So that's Hashem. That's what we're going to see. But what are the basic shlavim? What are the basic stages in the Nekeva's development? That is the process of Yitzias Mitzrayim. So in the Kisvei, there's many stages, but it's broken down for our purposes. We'll break it down into 3 different stages of the moon. There are 3 different stages where the moon can find herself. The highest stage, as we've been talking about, is when the moon and the sun are the same stature with the same crown. That's the highest. We'll say outside. What's the lowest? The lowest is mamish all the way to the floor. Like the pasuk says, Ragleha Yardes Mavis. Mamish, death itself, completely not even the same stratosphere as the sun. I mean, obviously, we understand that the sun and the moon, but if you think about it, obviously they're all in space, you know what I'm saying? But if you think about it, we know that distance-wise, there's a very, very great distance between the sun and the moon. And even in our way of on a very simple level of us experiencing sun and the moon, they're not on the same planes. Sun is during the day, moon is at night. They never really see each other. There's a little bit of overlap sometimes in the month and so on, but they come out, they're ships passing in the night. They never even see each other. That's the lowest description. That's the lowest madrega, where it's mamish, completely disconnected from each other. And then you have something in between. And this is going to be what we're going to see Bez Hashem soon. The in-between stage is when the Nekeva is raised up to the Zachar, but they're not of equal height. So they're in the same atmosphere. They're in the same arena. But they're not, but the Zachar is still taller, so to speak, than the Nekeva. The Rebbe Shalom made the world in such a way, right? Again, I'm obviously we record, so I have to be careful. There's no inyan that you have to be taller than your wife. There's no such inyan. Rebbe Feinstein's wife was taller than him. There's no such inyan. But the B'derach Klal, Ruba Deruba, just the Metzias is that men are taller than women. That's just the Metzias. So that's a description of this middle stage, just a mashal for this middle stage, where the Nekeva is in the same environment as the Zachar, but just not as tall as the Zachar. They're not sharing the same crown, because the crown is be'ikar on the Zachar, and the Nekeva is not as tall as the Zachar. Now, does this mean that when Mashiach comes, all of our wives will grow, we'll get taller, be the equal size? Understand, I'm assuming that you understand what I'm talking. I'm not, we're talking about primis over here. So, but these are the 3 stages that the moon can be in. Number 1, all the way on the floor. Number 2, brought up to the sun, but not as tall as the sun. They're not sharing the same crown, so to speak. And stage 3, mamish, the same height, sharing the same crown. Those are the 3 stages of the moon. Take a look at Maramuk number 4. This is a piece in the Eitz Chaim. It's the Kidush Hachodesh and Shar Miyat Hayirech. There's a whole section about the story of the moon. Now, just a little bit of introduction. There's all introductions. In the language of the Arizal, he doesn't use, sometimes he does use this word, but in this particular piece, he doesn't use the word Nekeva. He uses the word Malchus. Malchus is another code word for Nekeva. All right, we'll see Bez Hashem soon why. But Malchus, just in your own mind, in this paragraph, Malchus equals Nekeva, okay? So it says the Arizal, Hine Gidol HaMalchus, the development of Malchus, the development of Nekeva, is Eina B'Pamachas. It's not immediate. It's not right away. She doesn't go from all the way mamish, descending in the depths, all the way back to the same crown as the Zachar in one fell swoop. It doesn't happen like that. Rak bizmanim harbi niskenes. It takes time. It's a process. It's a development. So now the Rizal breaks it down for us. Tachlis hamiyut asheba, the lowest stage. He the Amrullah is what the Rabbanah Shalom said to the moon. Go become diminished. That was the lowest stage. To kulu apilasata, that the entirety of the moon has been lowered under the sun, just mamish on the floor. That's the lowest stage. The tachlis hagidol shalah, and the greatest height that the moon can reach is shia im hazachar panim epanim, that they should be one together, face to face, shavla gamri, equal height. Vishtamshu beis melachim bekeser echad, and two kings sharing the same crown. That's the greatest height. That's what the moon had a problem with initially, that idea, but that would be the greatest ideal. Between those two stages of absolute diminishment and absolute full stature is what? Is the middle, which is that she should be raised up and developed to be of the stature of the Zachar, shir kamasei panim epanim, to be able to be face to face, so to speak, with the sun. But this middle stage is that she still doesn't have her own light, just like the moon doesn't have its own light. She still is receiving from the sun, and the sun is taller than her. So that's the middle stage of where she's already developed, and the cave is developed, but al kol panim, the Zachar is still dominant, and the Zachar is still taller, and the crown is still on the Zachar. These are the three stages. Fine. So again, summing it all up, the story of creation is the diminishment of Nekeva. The tachlis is, if again, like I said, just the chazer, if our Nekeva and our Zachar would be unified as much as possible, which is same height, same crown, then we can hear then we'll be able to receive Aleph from Hashem. The problem is, from the beginning of creation, the moon has been diminished. And there's an imbalance between Zachar and Nekeva, there's a letter Beis. And because there's this duality within ourselves, the Zachar is over here, the Nekeva is all the way down there, so we can't receive Aleph from Hashem, because we ourselves are not Aleph. We have nothing about us that's Alephic. So the Rabbanah Shalom therefore sends us into Galus Mitzrayim in order for us primarily to raise up the Nekeva from her fallen state, to return to her state of balance, of absolute unity, of Shnei Melachim Mishtamshim B'Keser Echad, and then you can hear the Aleph of Har Sinai. And in order for that Nekeva to be raised up to this full stature with the same crown, she has to go through stages. She starts off mamish on the floor, and then she gets to the next stage, which is the same, sort of the same arena as the Zachar, but nevertheless the Zachar is taller, and the Zachar primarily has the crown. And then she can get to the highest stage, which is Shnei Melachim Mishamshim B'Keser Echad. And then, when that moment, you can hear Anochi Hashem Elokecha on Har Sinai. That's the story. Fine. Next point, and with this we're gonna finish our introduction. Now let's begin to define for ourselves what does Zachar mean in Avodas Hashem, and what does Nekev mean in Avodas Hashem. If we could define that, now we have a roadmap. We could have a mahalach of what to do. So we're going to give our definitions now, but even the definitions are going to still be missing. Okay? So like I said, introduction. Marmukah number 5. It's a piece from the Zohar Hachodesh in Chelak Aleph, page Reish Yud. The Zohar Hachodesh has just 4 words, and this is going to define for us what this inyan is for our purposes in this mini-series. The Zohar Hachodesh says like this: Koil v'dibur. Every single one of us, the Rabbanah Shalom created the human being, right, as a nefesh chaya, ruch mala, a speaking being. Speech comprises of 2 parts. In the Zohar Hachodesh, we find there's an idea of koil, which is voice, sound, and dibur, your ability to take, using your mouth, to cut that sound into pieces and to come up with words. Right? That's how you talk. You have to create sound, which is energy. You know, what is sound? Sound is noise. I'm saying it's vibrations. It's kaiches. You're expressing kaiches through your vocal cords. That's koil. And then your mouth comes with all different parts, your teeth and your tongue and your lips and so on, and the back of your throat and so on, to cut that sound into pieces and to turn into words. That's what sound is. That's what speech is. Koil, sound, v'dibur. And dibur is a hard, because it's just one speech. It means, for our purposes, we'll just use the word dibur, okay? You know what dibur is. The ability to cut the sound into pieces to create words. Koil v'dibur. It says the Zohar, Zachar v'nukvei. That's Zachar Nekev. That was Zachar Nekev. So now we have that the sound of a person is metaphorically speaking is zachardik, and the dibur of a person is nekevadik. Okay. Now we have a little bit of an opening into understanding a very big inyan, what we find in Galus Mitzrayim, which is what we have now. This let's before that, plugging this Zohar Kadosh into everything we've said, which is now we can say the following words: that the tachlis of Galus Mitzrayim, and to allow ourselves to stand by our Sinai and Tirnei Chashon Lekecha, was tikkun, to fix dibur. Tikkun at dibur. Because again, dibur equals nekeva. That's what the Zohar said. Koil, the voice, sound is zachar, and dibur is nekeva. And everything we've been talking about until now is the whole story of Galus Mitzrayim and Galus Mitzrayim and Har Sinai. It was all a story of what? Of raising the nekeva up and rescuing the princess, right? Taking the nekeva up, returning to her full stature, returning the moon to the stature of the sun. Well, now we have another word to describe this process, or another dynamic to describe this, which is koil and dibur. So in other words, the story of Yitzis Mitzrayim is now redefined as a story of rescuing dibur, rescuing speech. And this is in fact something we find very strongly with Mitzrayim, is that the story of Galus Mitzrayim is also revolving around speaking. Moshe Rabbeinu cannot speak. And that's a big maniyah that he has in order to take the Jewish people out. We said in the parsha this past Shabbos that Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the Jewish people, they couldn't hear him. There's an inability to speak. Even during the exile of Mitzrayim, those first couple aliyahs of Parsha Shemais, the Jewish people are moaning, they're groaning, they're crying, but they're not talking. For example, parai, this is all from the Svarim. Parai, for example, is the same letters, the same words, pei, reish, ayin, hey, that's parai, is the same letters as ha'oref, which is the back of the neck. This is the oref is where speech comes from, is in the front, parai is in the back. The opposite of speech. The opposite of speech. Pesach, which is a celebration of Yitzis Mitzrayim, is what? Is all about talking. Everything we do on Pesach, we talk about what we're doing. Whatever we do, also we talk about it. Yitzis Mitzrayim culminates with Kriyas Yamsuf, where we sing about Yitzis Mitzrayim. Speech is a major inyan with Mitzrayim. What does speech have to do with anything? The answer is, again, all of Yitzis Mitzrayim is about the Jewish people rectifying, rescuing, being masaking their tzad nekeva. And again, it doesn't just mean men versus women. Each and every one of us, you have a nekeva, you have a zachar. And the Zohar Kadosh has identified for us, your tzad nekeva is your koach hadibur. It's your koach hadibur. This is why we find, the pasuk says, who wants life? Watch your mouth. Don't speak lashon hara. Be masakin your dibur. Why does that result in being alive? The answer is life comes from Zachar and Nekeva coming together, right? Zachar and Nekeva together, you have a Mazel Tov, B'ez Hashem, right? So in other words, life and continuity comes from a balance of Zachar and Nekeva. Having your voice and words in a healthy relationship, that's the same thing as Zachar and Nekeva being together. Now take a look at Maramukah number 6. The Zohar Kadosh basically describes all of this within the context of the story of Moshe Rabbeinu, which we all know. So the Zohar Kadosh is in Parshas Ve'era. So it says, "My va'ani aras v'sayim." We know Parshas Ve'era, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Rabban Shalom, "How could I go to Para?" It's a common thing that he keeps on fighting. How could I go to Para? Ani aras v'sayim. My words are. I can't speak. I can't talk. I'm an aros v'sayim. My lips are uncircumcised. So the Zohar Kadosh asks, what's Moshe Rabbeinu talking about? This is an old conversation you had already in Parshas Shemais, right? From the very beginning, Moshe said to Hashem, "Kvad peh, kvad loshen." I can't talk. I can't articulate myself. And Hashem said, "Who gives you a mouth? I'm going to be with you. It's going to be fine." So what's Moshe Rabbeinu all of a sudden keep on bringing that up again? Like I can't talk. We had this conversation already. What's going on? It already says, Moshe already had this conversation in Parashas Shemais. I can't talk. I'm not a good orator. And the Rebbeinu Shalom answered him, Who created a mouth? I'll be with you. So this is an old conversation already. And now he's repeating again, I'm uncircumcised in my lips. What does it mean, uncircumcised in the lips? Circumcision is an inyan with the bris, which is Zachar Nekeva, right? So you understand where this is headed. There's an uncircumcised mouth. So it says the Zohar Kadosh like this: Ela Raza Ihu. This is a secret. The first conversation in Parashas Shemais, that was a Pashut conversation. Moshe is saying, I can't talk. And Hashem is saying, don't worry, I'll put the right words in your mouth. Fine. That's simple, like oratory skills. But now we're talking about something much deeper. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Moshe Kala. Moshe, for the Jewish people, is the Zachar. Moshe Rabbeinu is the voice of the Jewish people. We have this idea, right, that Moshe is Shalko Keneged Kol Yisrael. Moshe is equals to the Jewish people. Moshe is our leader. Moshe gives us direction. Moshe Rabbeinu, just need like 10 more minutes. Right? So Moshe Rabbeinu is the Zachar. So it says like this. Moshe Kala. Moshe is the sound. The Diburai, but his Dibur, the Iumila, which are his words, Havagalus, it's Galus. It's in Galus. So the whole story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is a story of Dibur being in Galus. So he says, Vavi'u otim lafar shamilin. And because of this, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, he's saying something much deeper to Rebbeinu Shalom. It's not just a matter of finding the right words. I trust you'll give me the right words. But my words are going to be unable to do anything because the Koich HaDibur is in Galus. So you're telling me, here's the catch-22. The Jewish people are in Galus, and what does Galus mean? It means that Dibur is fallen to the wayside, that there's a disconnect between your voice and the words that you want to say. There's a disconnect between those two. And you're telling me that I should speak in order to get them out of Galus. How could my words bring Geula if the Galus itself means that I can't speak? That's the definition of Galus itself. So in other words, what Moshe Rabbeinu is asking, it's not just like, I don't know what to say. Hashem says, I'll tell you what to say. It's deeper than that. How could words take the Jewish people out of Galus if the Galus itself is a Galus of words? You need something else to take you out of Galus, right? The Gemara always says, "Ein chavish mater sasam yisrael." You can't take yourself out of prison, right? If you're in prison, you need someone else to take you out. So the prison of Mitzrayim is Dibur. The Dibur is in prison. So how could Dibur take it out? This is the kasha of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a good kasha. So he says, "Ubegin da Omar." That's what Moshe says. Ve'ech yishmeini parai. How could Pari hear me? If the Koich HaDibur is in Galus, so how could the Koich HaDibur take us out? I don't have words. The Kolzman the Dibur have begalusa, and as long as Dibur is in exile, and others as the Nekeva is fallen, Dibur is in Galus. Moshe Azil, so Moshe goes Kolabloy Dibur, sound without words. That's the situation of Moshe and Galus. That's the situation of Galus. There's Koil, there's sound, there's voice, there's the sun, but there's no Dibur. And there's a disconnect. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu's question is. And this continued on, this disconnect between Koil and Dibur, which again, we don't know what that means yet. And if it says Hashem, but we're getting closer. This disconnect between Koil, which is masculine, Zachar, and Dibur, which is Nekeva, which is all the way on the bottom. This disconnect was not fully fixed until we got to Har Sinai. This Yehavis Araisa, where the Torah was given, the letter Aleph, now sound and voice and Dibur could become unified. This is the story of Galus Mitzrayim, of Zachar and Nekeva becoming one, Ukedein Milamol, and now words can finally be expressed properly. That's the meaning. Now the Rebbeinu Shalom can talk. Because finally by Har Sinai, there's a union between Zachar and Nekeva. Ukedein Moshe Shtakach Shalom B'Milei Kedekal Yes, and now Moshe can speak properly. Kol v'dibur gechad b'shleim. So this is the story of Galus Mitzrayim. Again, this is all the introduction of Bez Hashem, where we're going to discover for the next few weeks that the inyan of Shovim is obviously to watch what you see, v'chulu, but to get to the real kishkas of it, or at least the way we're going to learn it, is that the inyan of Shovim is to be masakin dibur, to somehow, and this is going to be the paradigm that we're going to develop for the next few weeks, is that you have koil. There's such a part of it which is called sound, and there's a part of it which is called articulation of dibur. And the situation of the exile of Galus Mitzrayim is that those are disconnected. You have your sound, but you don't have the koich of articulation. It's all the way in the bottom. And the process of Galus Mitzrayim, the avoid of Shovim, is to raise up the power of articulation, to become unified with your sound, to be able to express words with sound through articulation strong. That you should be able to say words stark, that it should be a good koich hadibur. That is the avodah of these weeks. And when that takes place, then you could experience the aleph of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, because you've unified your Zachar and your Nekeva under one crown. With all of this, we could explain why this is very strongly connected to Shabbos. Why? Shabbos is in your Zachar and Nekeva, as I mentioned. But Shabbos, is our Kodesh says the following thing. Maramukah number 7, this is Zohar and Chayil Gimel, page Chaf Aleph on the base. Iskadish Yoimim, that Shabbos has been sanctified. What's the Kidush of Shabbos? Salik Puma v'shalat al kaila. On Shabbos, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us a proper mouth. This is like the Zohar. Ask the Svar, what are we talking about? A mouth? Adam and Chava were created on Friday. They were created with a mouth. What does it mean? No. Shabbos, the end of Shabbos is Koil and Dibur becoming one. That during the 6 days of the week, we're in this gullus. You have Koil, but your Dibur is all the way on the floor. Come Shabbos, Zoch and Akeva become one. The two crowns, they come together with the same crown. Koil and Dibur are unified. You have your personal Yitzias Mitzrayim. And now you can speak proper words properly. That's what Kidush Shabbos is. By the way, this is why Shabbos is Zecher L'Yitzias Mitzrayim, right? There's two places in Chumash where it talks about Shabbos, right? Shabbos is Zecher L'Maaseh Bereishis. That we know. We're resting on Shabbos because Hashem created the world. But there's another place where it says Zecher Yitzias Mitzrayim. Why is Shabbos connected to Yitzias Mitzrayim? The answer is the whole story of Yitzias Mitzrayim is Zoch and Akeva working it out that Zoch and Akeva should become one. Or, in other words, working it out that Koil and Dibur should become one. That's Shabbos. This is why on Shabbos we sing on Shabbos, right? And we talk good words on Shabbos. And we have to be extra careful with our words on Shabbos. There's a medrash that says that Rishon Bar Yochai was once sitting with his mother, and his mother was on Shabbos, and his mother was talking a lot. And Rishon Bar Yochai, in a nice way, said, Mama, he said, Shabbos. Just to remind her that Shabbos, and she held her mouth to make sure that she shouldn't say any improper words. Shabbos is deeply connected with the Koich HaDibur, with Koil and Dibur becoming unified, with Zoch and Akeva coming together. This is also why there's a famous Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that even people that are not so trusted in halacha during the 6 days of the week are more trusted on Shabbos. Because Shabbos, to be able to say lying, and there should be a fallen speech in disarray, which is Golas, Lashon Hara, and so on. That's the opposite of Shabbos. Shabbos is Lashon Kodesh. That's why there's a minig by Mad Tzadikim that on Shabbos, they would only speak Lashon Kodesh on Shabbos. Because that's what Shabbos is. Shabbos is Yitzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos is standing by Har Sinai, Zoch and Akeva under one crown. The Gemara says, everyone agrees that the Torah was given on Shabbos. The Zohar Kodesh says that on Shabbos, Moshe Rabbeinu returns our crowns to us, right? In Har Sinai, by the Egel, we lost our crowns. We fell into disarray again. But on Shabbos, the crowns are returned to us. The holy of Shabbos is Zoch and Akeva in one, Shalom Bayis, the Shabbos candles, Koich HaDibur, to be able to articulate yourself properly, should become one, unified again. That's what Shabbos is. That's Golos Mitzrayim. So the weeks of Shovim, where we learn about these stories of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Har Sinai on Shabbos, so it's shine with this Havayda. Okay, so Bez Hashem, over the next few weeks, that's what we're going to be learning about practical. This is the least practical part of it, okay? Bez Hashem is going to be practical. And Bez Hashem, what does it mean, Koil? What does it mean, Dibur? And how to bring them together, and how to raise Dibur up out of Golos. Yashikayach.